Hello YouTube world, Pretend Farmer here. Not a real farmer, just pretending. Today we're going to talk about fermenting our feed. If you look closely at your feed, no matter what kind you're getting, you'll see that it's got a lot of powder mixed in with it where it's ground up at the feed mill. Unfortunately, a lot of times that ends up going to waste. So why in the world would we want to ferment our feed? When feed is fermented, it's said that the nutrients are going to be more readily digestible to the chickens, which is going to give them more nutritional benefit out of their feed. Now, I recommend you start out doing this on a really small scale with just a mason jar, rather than waste a whole bucket full of feed. What you're going to do is you're going to add water up to about halfway in the jar. You want the ratio to be about 1/3 feed to 2/3 water. Another benefit that you get is by the food being all wet and kind of mashed together, it's going to result in the food clumping up, and there's not going to be that powdery stuff that goes to waste. They're going to eat that as well. So this is supposed to, in theory, get you more out of your feed and save you money in the long haul. I've read that most people that do this on a regular basis can save about 30% on their feed costs. That's about what you're looking for there. Now, you can do this with any kind of chicken feed. It doesn't matter if you're using a layer crumble, pellets, scratch grains, whatever. You just want to put it in there and then give it a stir around to get the process started. You'll want to come back and stir it about 2 or 3 times a day during the fermentation process. This stuff all has to be done really carefully, or else this stuff can mold and make your chickens very sick. It's not just something where you pour it in a container and then you come back after a week and give it to your chickens. You'll kill them. The most important thing is to smell this stuff frequently. If at any point it starts to smell rotten or smell like puke, get rid of it. You've messed something up. And usually this happens when the feed starts to mold, and that will be because you didn't put enough water in the jar. You can't just fill the jar up a little bit over the feed, because as this stuff absorbs water, it's going to swell and expand. If at any point your feed swells up and it gets dry and air can get to it, it's going to start to mold very quickly, and it's going to get disgusting. So you do not want to feed that to your chickens. You always want to make sure it stays submerged in water. By the second day, when you take the lid off your jar, you should be able to look down and see bubbles coming up. That's an indication that your feed is fermenting and it's kind of off-gassing. For this reason, you don't want to screw the lid down on your jar super tight, or this thing will build up pressure, and that's not a good thing. It'll blow out and make a mess. So you want to leave the lid kind of loose and just keep stirring it about twice, maybe 3 times a day. After about 3 to 4 days, your feed will have been fully fermented, and it should be ready to give to the chickens. It should have a nice sour smell to it, but not a smell that makes you gag. Well, the time has come. I've strained off most of the water from this jar of fermented feed that's been sitting on the counter for 4 days now. Kind of has about the same kind of consistency as oatmeal. So not a whole lot in this jar, not for all these chickens. But this will be their first time ever having fermented feed. So we're going to see how they react to this and see if they even like it before I do it on a larger scale. So let's go ahead and stage the scene here. This is a little runny. If you're feeding your chickens this stuff in the middle of winter when it's really cold out, you need to make sure you don't give them a boatload of it, because the stuff will freeze and then it'll go to waste. So this is a nice small portion that I know they're going to gobble up pretty quick. So as you can see, they kind of like it, but they're not really going ballistic over it like I thought they would. I figured for sure it would be going in just a few minutes, and most of the chickens, they ate a few bites and went on. Apparently these seem to really think it's great stuff. You know, my thoughts overall are this is a process that's a kind of a pain in the butt, especially to do it on a larger scale where that's the only thing you're doing is feeding your chickens fermented feed all the time. You would have to stage buckets. You would have to constantly be adding feed to this bucket. And then of course, there's risks involved as far as if it's gonna mold or not. I just really don't like the idea of it. I think here on the Pretend Farm, we're gonna just continue feeding them their dry feed. You know, to me, the best way to save money on your chicken feed is to just let them free range. Even if it's supervised and just for a little bit of the day, it's still gonna let them go out and eat stuff other than their feed, which will save you money. Also, don't give them but so much feed at one time. As you can see here, when you give them a full feeder, they end up knocking a lot of the feed out on the ground, and they scratch and eat up a lot of it. But a lot of it, they don't eat. It just ends up going to waste, especially if it rains. All this is gonna turn into mush. Rationing the chicken's feed will also prevent the birds and other stuff, mice, rodents coming in at night. You won't have all that other stuff eating your feed if you just give them a little bit at a time rather than a whole 15-pound feeder. And that's something we're gonna probably change up here on the Pretend Farm, and I'm gonna start cutting them back more. Because I've always filled their feeder up, and I know there's feed that's disappearing that they're not eating. So it's going to waste. But I don't feel like the best solution is to go with fermenting feed. I think we're just gonna try and ration a little bit combined with free ranging. It should save the same amount of money that fermenting the feed would. I don't personally feel like they're gonna get any more nutritional benefit out of fermented feed that they're lacking now. They look like perfectly healthy birds to me. So that aspect of it to me is just kind of like whatever. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Be sure and click that like button and subscribe to the channel. Good things are happening here on the Pretend Farm.